Hello everyone and welcome back to another Strategoy video. We're doing another tier video here and I'm kind of planning to do these every time a new GHB comes out, or after a while that it's come out at least. Just because these units really swap places sometimes depending on what the rules are for the new GHB. A new kind of tier video has been requested quite often in the Discord, so that's what I'm doing today. Let's dive right in. I'm super excited to do one again. Even if I initially thought they were kind of weird and easy content, I've kind of started to liking what they bring to the table. So before we start off with distributing all the units here, I just want to quickly talk about the 5 tiers that I made. So most often I'm mostly interested in the top 2 here and then in the bottom one. Why is that? Well, the 2 orange squares here, or the 2 orange tiers, are kind of build dependent, I suppose. I would say that most things that end up in middle of the pack are usually things that are pretty good in specific builds, but are not amazing overall. Same for questionable usefulness. You could say, do I want that? But then again, it can depend or even change depending on the build you're running. But then the units that are best to avoid, units that I would place there, are definitely things that I would not take in most any builds, actually. That is just subpar to anything else that we've got. While things that are in auto include or very good, I would take in almost any builds, actually. So that's why I'm mostly interested in the top 2 tiers and the bottom one. That being said, let's dive right in. We're starting off with our heroes, or some of our heroes at least, and we're starting off with the Miyaris Purifiers. Now, last time I rated these guys quite lowly, mainly because I really just didn't see a point to them. Now I've kind of started liking them, actually. I think they're a good fit if you've got some points over and you want a hero that has decent casting. Miyari is quite a good caster overall, and he brings his small unit that can spread out around the table and hold an objective, for example. I would say they're the middle of the pack. In the Discord chat, I've seen some people really enjoying these guys, so if you're curious, please join Discord and have a chat about them there. I think their biggest strength is their +1 to cast from Miyari, and because they're not extremely expensive. If you remember that you can split Miyari from his other unit and thus control more objectives than just a single one. Now we are in season 2 of the 22-23 GHB, so Galician champions are all the rage right now. So expect them being ranked quite highly. Miyari is obviously not a Galician champion because he's unique, but the following 3 are. So the Caligrave, I've been liking this guy more and more. I think he's very good right now, mostly because he's a Galician champion. I'm not gonna lie. If it wasn't season 2 Galician champion season, I would probably put him in the middle of the pack. But his War Scroll spell is pretty decent. Him being a Cenarian, having an auto cast on a 9 once per game is very strong. And his ability to drop a rune on the ground where you influence leadership and spellcasting is also pretty potent, actually, especially around turn 3 where those things really start adding up. So that's why I quite like the Caligrave. Now the Lore Seeker, he's also pretty good. I gotta say, there are so many missions in the current GHB that reward you for taking objectives that you can't possibly reach during the first turn, or that are just too dangerous to reach with the Galician champion. Now he can do that. And remember, if you put the Tunnel Master trait on him from the current GHB once again, then you can put him on an objective. If you've got turn 1, you can just claim your victory points there, easy points, and then teleport him back to safety if you want to keep him safe. So that is quite useful. I would almost put him in auto include, were it not that it's just very expensive as well. And we lost the Lament Light spell, that kind of makes him a little bit less useful at times. Now do remember, in certain situations you might even be able to fit him next to an enemy objective. You could use a Realm spell with him, and then he's once again very potent. So I would really edge this on the fine line between very good and auto include. The Cathaller, you guys might know that I'm not a huge fan of the Cathaller. She comes last in my list of small scenario heroes. I would put her in the middle of the pack or very good. I think she would only be very good once again because she's a Galician champion and because we've got the Rune of the Centhoi. So in that case, she would be amazing. But in all other situations, I would only put her in the middle of the pack. I think if you're not really looking for another scenario with another tool set, she grades lower than the other ones. The Ballista, even with the buffs that they've received, I think right now they're best to avoid, honestly. Their price point is still a bit too steep compared to Sentinels that just do their job way better. Even against monsters, their damage is just too unreliable, honestly. Their D3 damage becoming a flat 3 against monsters is very nice, I will say. But against all other targets, you're really not benefiting from their power. And now that the monster season is over, you have to wonder how often that they're going to be useful compared to Sentinels. So if you can bring Sentinels instead, I would definitely do that. One Ballista could be interesting. I know when we did the review for the new book with Siegfried was advocating taking 3 Ballistae, but I think now he's also kind of past that point. And I think in a Discord we've all kind of ditched the Ballista, which is a pain. Now that we've placing units in the best to avoid tier anyway, we'll tackle the Foxes. I would not have expected that I would say that in any point in the future, but here we are. Foxes are really bad right now. Both Severith and the normal Fox are super bad. I'm just going to place them both there. Let me just quickly explain why I think they're pretty bad. It's not that their rule set is terrible. It's just that with them losing their shooting phase movement, they have kind of lost their entire shtick. So now they are just Ballista that move fast, and they are more than 100 points more expensive. So you could almost take 2 Ballista for the price of 1 normal Fox, which is crazy if you think about it. When would you take these guys? Well, I mean, they're still okay, I guess. They are still Ballista that move fast, so they will still inflict some damage, albeit that damage is not reliable at all. But them being super fast is handy, especially in the new GHB missions, where you have certain missions that have objectives that are way spread out. So then a fast moving unit is very useful. The question is it useful enough to pay 250 points or more for in case of Severith? Personally, I don't think so. I think you've got better choices, especially if you're only looking for a single fast moving model. For example, the Wind Mage. The Wind Mage right now, I really like him. The only downside to him right now is that he doesn't really have any units that synergizes well with him. Still though, he is a Galician champion. He's super fast. He can get to those objectives that you want Galician champions on. So I would definitely place him in the very good category right now. Remember, he also still brings a transporting vortex if you want him to, which is a very strong spell in itself. He would even be better, I think, if Foxes were good. Then it would almost move him up to auto-include, I think. Now, in the tournament scene right now, wind charges have been taken quite often, so you might see some synergies there, and that would put him almost in the auto-include section, I suppose. But as of right now, I would only rate him very good, and I would still rate him below the Lore Seeker. If you are a Wind Mage lover and you want some tricks or want some hype, Agaroth in the Discord is a big advocate of all Wind Mage related shenanigans, so go have a chat with him there. Then we get to the twins, Alania and Elethor. Honestly, I'm not as down on those guys as some people might think I would be. The thing is just the same problem is with them is the same as it was before. They are in the same points bracket as Altharion, and are they just as good? Once again, the answer is no. They kind of suffer damage-wise when you compare them to Eltharion, but they are way more movable. They can have a ward save, and they might be more useful in the late game. But they are less dependable, and you can't really use them in the first or second round because their damage is just abysmal at that point. Right now, I think they are of questionable usefulness. I just played a game against Zinj, and honestly, at a certain point, I almost wished I had brought these guys just for the +1 to unbinds and spellcasting. But then again, they also don't have a shooting attack, and if you compare them to Eltharion, who does have a shooting attack that does not count as a shooting attack, at least he can still snipe Galician champions. So I think right now the twins are of questionable usefulness. Then the Wind Chargers. Well, I just mentioned that they are taken in the tournament scene quite often now. They are on par with Dawn Riders, but they serve a different purpose. Both are quite good screens. I think damage-wise, they are both quite bad, honestly. Don't expect them to do much. But they can surprise you, both the Dawn Riders and the Wind Chargers. The point where they differ and why I think Wind Chargers are taken more often than Dawn Riders right now is because they're just very, very quick. And in a tournament scene, you usually play on a table with a lot of terrain, and Wind Chargers count terrain as flying creatures counted, so they can just move over it as if it wasn't there, which is amazing for capturing. So if you're intent on using Dawn Riders just for screens, you might as well go with Wind Chargers for the added movement shenanigans. But then again, the Dawn Riders are casters, they have a better save, so they have a better chance of surviving, and they are better against hordes. Honestly, I think both are alright to take in almost any list right now, even outside of Helon. I think one unit of 5 of these is not bad, but in Helon they're definitely better because they fill the battle line requirement, obviously. I think if you're taking outside of Helon and you want more than 5, you should probably go back to playing Helon though. Then we come to the Regent, and the Regent was my boy or my girl, depending on what gender you think they are. Them losing the artifact to get a 4+ ward is kind of rough on them now, because they just don't fill that slot anymore that I used them for as a tanky buff wagon. They are still quite good. They do inflict more damage now than ever before. They can inflict 2 mortal wounds for every 6, or a 5 if you cast Parafish on them. So they are quite... they did get an improvement, or a buff, I should say, to damage. But they lost some overall usefulness, and that's not to their own rule set, but just due to the way we play Lumineth right now. We've kind of shifted from a super solely Vanari focused build, and we're getting more into that middle combined arms build, where you bring, in a tournament scene, you bring Teclis and a ton of Sentinels still, but then fill it up with, for example, Wind Chargers or something. Now, when is a Regent still very good? When you bring a lot of Blade Lords. He can buff those guys, and honestly, if you've played with Blade Lords, they are so good right now, especially with the new Realm Command, which I will get into later. I think the Regent is still very good. The only reason why I'm placing him mostly in the middle of the pack, just before Mayari, but behind the Cathalar, is simply because he's not a Galician champion. You really want to fill up that slot. Well, then we get to the other Lord Regents. Lyrior. Honestly, their points are so close together now that if you're playing Eumetrica and you want a Regent, you might as well take Lyrior. But apart from that, I would still probably go for the Regent. Lyrior is, to me, is it questionable usefulness? Honestly, I don't think so. I think he's middle in the pack right now, because Eumetrica builds are pretty good, and he generates more CP, which is nice. He's quite good in combat compared to the Lord Regent, especially. He has a shooting attack. He's fast, so he can be very interesting, and he can do some work for you, especially against Chaos armies. Then the Bannerblade. The Bannerblade is quite cool. I like him, especially because he's super cheap right now, like super cheap. He's almost as cheap as an endless spell. The thing is, do you want an endless spell or do you want a banner blade? And usually the answer is I want an endless spell, especially for the battle tactic in our own battle tome. The banner blade, I would say, is between the middle of the pack and questionable usefulness. I personally like re-rolling charges, but it's definitely build dependent. So I will put him in questionable usefulness. And mostly because it just depends on what plan you have for your list. Then we get to the Blade Lords, and I think we have our first spot in the auto-include section. Well, auto-include, let me just quickly explain. I don't mean that you have to take them in all armies, but honestly, you would be remiss not to include a unit of 10 if you can. I really love these units. You see them not as often as I would have thought in the tournament scene, but that's mostly because the tournament scene really loves shooting and playing a control game. The Blade Lords just have so many advantages right now. They are, first of all, they're a very good line of defense for your Galician champions if your opponent brings Galician sharpshooters. But their damage is amazing. You once again see hordes, so their Sun Metal Great Blades can do the flurry of blows and then inflict a shit ton of hits. Remember, they also have Sun Metal now. They actually have the rule now, so they do mortal wounds on 6s. If you have a Venard Lord Regent, you can even buff that up to 5+. But where they really shine is their perfect strike profile. For each model, you just roll 1 die, and on a 2+ you inflict a mortal wound. This just deletes units, or at least small heroes. And in a season where small heroes are key to a lot of victories and you can't really snipe them easily, a unit that can just delete them in close combat without much of a hassle is amazing. On top of that, you have the Realm Command right now that allows units to add an extra attack to their profile if they don't pile in. This effectively doubles their damage potential from Perfect Strike, so a unit of 10 with a range of 2 doesn't really need to pile in most cases. They roll 1 die per model. Because of the Realm Command, you add an extra die to those rolls, so that's 20 dice, and every 2+ is a mortal wound. I mean, guys, you do the math, but even against standard units, that is a huge amount of very reliable damage. So I would definitely put them in the auto-include right now. Do remember, the auto-include has a question mark, obviously, because this entire list is super subjective. And still, every unit depends on your own skill, your own preference, and your own plan with your list. The endless spells are still quite meh most of the time, but the rune is pretty good. So I would say because of the rune itself, I'm placing them in very good because I just see the rune in almost every list right now. I have seen a resurgence of the Twin Stones as well, which is nice, mostly because they're so cheap. They are still worth taking. But the Sanctum is just still weird. I don't really know why GW doesn't really even try to make it more useful, because it's just in a super weird spot right now. The Temple is amazing, obviously auto-include, because first of all it's free, but then the reroll, the free CP, if you've got a Guardian in it, is just so good. And with a season full of Galician champions, you will have a Shrine Guardian, so that's not difficult to get. Then we have the Stone Guard, and these guys really got an upgrade. I think in Geometrica right now, they are obviously not to include because they fill your battle line and they are what you need for a balanced Geometrica build. In any other army besides Geometrica, I would put them in the middle of the pack. A unit of 5 is still quite good. They can still hold an objective very well with their 4+ ward. The question is, are they better than other choices? Are they better than 5 Blade Lords, for example? I would say if you compare 5 to 5, then no. But if you compare 10 Blade Lords to 10 Stone Guard, the Blade Lords win out in almost every situation, unless you're playing them in Geometrica, of course. So I would place these guys at middle of the pack, but on the front line, because in Geometrica they move to auto-include or very good, so somewhere either here or here. Let's place them here. They're definitely not a bad pick for any army. The Stone Mage in itself has lost some usefulness to me because Voice of the Mountains, one of the best spells in the Lord of the High Peaks, is gone. He's still very necessary if you're playing cows though. And cows are cool, and cows are very good in my eyes. So I will place the Stone Mage in the middle of the pack, somewhere behind the Cathalar, I suppose. Let's see, somewhere around here. If you're playing cows, you need to bring one of these. If you're playing 2 cows, definitely. If you're playing 1 cow, you might be able to not bring one. But if you're playing 2 Spirits of the Mountains, then definitely bring a Stone Mage. Their spells are not bad, it's just that there's better casters and better spells now. He's still a Galician champion though, and most people will focus on the cow first. Keeps on Stone Guard close to him, and he can't even be targeted, so that's nice. Teclis, my boy. Honestly, I really expect him to lose value, but he remains at the top. I just gotta be honest. I get the question so often, can you build a good tournament list without Teclis? I stick to my answer that the answer is yes, but it's just that he's such a toolbox. He's so flexible, he can do everything you want him to do and more. He is good in almost every nation, and he's just such a good answer to problems that we don't have an answer to. For example, just having Teclis in your list changes your matchups with Disciples of Tzeentch from very unfavorable to very favorable. I play against Tzeentch quite often. If I bring Teclis, I think there is very little way for my opponent to take home a win. And if I don't, there is a very small chance that I take home a win. So he swings those matchups very quickly. I would still put him in an auto-include in front of the temple. Maybe in front of the... Let's place him behind the Blade Lords. Just simply because I don't want everyone to think that Teclis is still something that you need to win, because that's definitely not the case. Then we get to Cow City. I love both of these guys. Avalenor and the Cow now have a bigger points discrepancy, which is nice because usually you would just take Avalenor every chance you could. Now the Cow itself is a bit cheaper and Avalenor is a lot more expensive. I would say in Geometrica builds they're both auto-includes, obviously. 3 cows is way too much, 2 cows is perfect. I think the normal cow is very good. I would even place him in front of the Stone Mage, the Wind Mage. One of these guys is such a huge threat. You might bring a Stone Mage and you wouldn't even hurt your lists that much by doing so, because you want Galician champions at some point anyway. But a cow right now slaps very hard. And remember, what most people tend to forget is that they have a range of 3 inches on their hammers. And those 3 inches do some work for you. Remember, everyone's hiding their Galician champions next to their battle line right now. They have to stay within 1 inches to not be targetable by range attacks. And the cows can just charge into the battle line and still hit those heroes behind those screens of 3 inches or less. So they are quite formidable in that aspect. Their shooting attack is swingy but also good. In Helon itself, it's hilarious. If you're within 6 inches and you shoot 2 30-inch lasers into their face for 2d6 damage, that is very impressive and is also very swingy, by the way. They also tend to miss a lot when I play them, but if they do hit, it's usually a high number of damage, so it kind of balances out that way, I guess. Avalenor has lost some value in my eyes just because he's very expensive right now. I would put him in the middle of the pack, honestly, in front of Lyrior, but behind the Stone Mage. Sorry, Avalenor. Do keep in mind, in Geometrica, this guy is just so much more valuable. I would not leave home without him in Geometrica. Then Eltharion. Again, another model that has been on the shelf for me for so long, except for all the games that I just tried him, just wishing that I could tell you guys that he's good. And finally I can. He's even, in my eyes, an auto include. Even in front of Teclis, in front of the Blade Lords, he is formidable. His damage is so reliable right now. He can also shoot Galician champions because his shooting attack doesn't really count as a shooting attack. He is a monster and hero killer. Don't send him off into hordes too easily if you don't have a plan for the other units that need to be killed. But otherwise, as long as you're not faced off against a lot of mortal wound output or a ton of low value attacks, he will do some work for you. You can combine him with a ward from Teclis or from the protection of Fishcasters, or even with a cow for the -1 to hit on a unit that's fighting him. And then we get to the juicy part, because his 3-up is obviously unmodifiable. Both negative and positive modifiers do not apply to his save. But having those ward saves on top of it, or the -1 to hit, is very good for him. He will blend every hero possible. He can even tackle god characters. Although I wouldn't really count on him dealing with them every time, but he does stand up to them quite formidably. Okay, moving on to Sentinels. Those guys I thought would take a hit, they did, and now they're back on top, simply because they are so popular in Helon right now. You see a lot of builds with Teclis and at least 2x20 Sentinels in Helon, for example. They are quite good there. They're also good without the Helon buff. Then I would honestly take him in units of 10, because as MSU you can now play them in a different way than before. Before, I think we always play screens in front of the Sentinels, and now honestly, if I'm playing Blade Lords, I'm placing my Sentinels in front of the Blade Lords, because I want the Sentinels to soften up my targets. Maybe I even put them in Galician sharpshooters to ping off some heroes, because most people don't take sharpshooters, so your opponent might not be prepared for it. And then when they die, the Blade Lords come in to wipe out the unit that killed the Sentinels. So in that regard, they're very good if you're taking two small units close to each other, or even if you're crazy enough to use a ballista. They go up to 30 inches again, which is nice. So right now, Sentinels still an auto-include in my eyes, in front of the temple obviously, but behind Teclis. Well, no. Probably in front of Teclis still. Quite good. I don't think I would ever leave home without them if I want to build a competitive list, in all honesty. Wardens. Wardens have taken a big hit, not only in their rules, but just in their overall usefulness, because Blade Lords kind of outclass them now if you're taking them for damage. I was one of the guys who took Wardens in units of 20, because then they just delete stuff. In that regard, they still do what they promise that they'll do, but they also die quite easily. And because it's a unit with a lot of models, you're often faced with a huge battle shock test. Whereas with the Blade Lords, them having 2 wounds apiece, those battle shock tests will have less of an impact on you. Having said that, I think Wardens are still very good. I would definitely place them in front of everyone else in this bracket. I love them. I love them still. Dawn Riders. Well, I made this whole comparison with them with the Kangaroos, so I'm guessing they're on the same footing for me right now. I'll place them right behind the Roos, because right now what you need is not a mediocre tankiness in screening format, but you need fast screens and fast units that can hunt small units or that can take objectives on the far sides of the field. So in that regard, you want to Roos. Now, there is one unit that is not in this tier video, because she's not in the tier list, sadly, but that's the Enlightener. And the Enlightener is probably the model that I would place in front of everyone else. I would place her even in front of Eltharion. She's such a high value unit in every single game that I play. just a threat of her is amazing. If you give her speed of Hish and you double up on the speed of Hish with your 3+, she empowers an entire play style on herself or by herself. That also makes her spells kind of a premium target for unbinds, which is fine because then you just bait them out with something else, or you let them unbind her and then you have an open field of spells for the rest of the turn. I think the most interesting part about her is that she's also still a Galician champion that can stand her own. She is fairly squishy, but with a right amount of Blade Lords close to her, she's quite good. Her War Scroll spell is of varying usefulness, I would say. I've not played a game where I actually liked having it on her or liked having it cast, but her being a 2-cast wizard really enables you to be flexible with your casts. Remember, she's also a very good target for a general. She likes all artifacts in the scenario table. You could give her the extra spells so that she knows 2 extra spells from the lore of Hish, but she's also probably the best target for Fast Learner combined with Rune of Santhoy for extra dispels if you've got some extra scenario wizards. So the Enlightener goes on top of the list in front of Eltharion, in front of everybody else. I haven't built a list without her yet, honestly. Since she's come out, she's always been an auto-include in my list. That's not to say that she's always been the MVP, far from it actually, but she's just so potent in what she can do. Just the potential threat of her really messes with my opponents, and I love her for that. All in all, I think our book right now is very good. I'll place them right behind the Rune of Petrification here. Lumineth themselves have not ended up in the top 8 in LVO, for example, but I was still with the old book. I think with a new season, old book as in old season, old GHB, with a new season on the horizon or being in full swing, I suppose, we have so many good Galician champions and we have so many great ways to deal with enemy Galician champions. Our army is slowly getting more tools. We used to be slow, now we have a lot of fast units. We didn't used to be tanky. Now the Elorith are finally tanky and useful. We didn't have any big damage dealers. Now our cows in Eltharion just slap everything. We didn't really have any reliable horde killers or low value damage. Now we have the Blade Lords. Honestly, the book itself is in a really good place. It has gotten a little bit more bland, I have to say, simply because we lost a lot of identity on certain war scrolls. But overall, the book is much easier to understand both from a player as opponent's perspective and is more consolidated in power, I think. It's much more clear what your units need and want to do. And thus it makes it much easier to play on the battlefield. Which is, at the end of the day, I think a good thing, because obviously this channel looks at the competitive scene mostly, but the game is still mostly played by non-competitive people, especially Age of Sigmar. So a book that kind of does well both in the competitive scene as in a just friendly games is a good book in my eyes. Alright, and with that being said, that's the end of this video, guys. I will get back to editing quite soon, and we'll have more contents for you in the near future. I hope you enjoy, and if you have some specific requests for future videos, do let me know in the comments or in Discord. We're always very eager to see you guys there or talk to you. Like and subscribe, share this video if you enjoyed it. And if you want some specific guides on more Lumineth units, also let me know. I'm always curious what guide you guys want to see first. Maybe it's time that I start refreshing the old guides. That's also a thing that I can do. So I'll hear from you soon and see you in the next one. Bye bye.